This video is sponsored by Raycon. Conceptually, in the wrong hands, the story of a killer Saint Bernard attacking a mother and son in their classic Ford Pinto sounds like some tasty B-movie level schlock, but in the world of Stephen King, it's honestly no surprise that he found a way to squeeze something horrific and tragic out of it. Cujo was arguably the morbid precursor to King's most unforgiving novel Pet Sematary, as it explores the direct premise of a beloved family pet that one day goes from being your fluffy beacon of love and comfort to a relentless hellhound drenched in slobbery gore. If that overdramatic description is anything to go by, like with most of King's work, including the one about shitweasels, Cujo's somewhat modest setup once again ruminates heavily on the gruelingly unfair and inescapable prospect of death appearing when we least expect it. While it's not extraordinary, spectacular, or even all that unusual compared to what we've seen from King, Cujo does not play nice, especially in the novel. It's a fairly nihilistic and incidental situation that doesn't aim to make a point about its grisly subject matter other than compound how twistedly undetermined nature can ultimately be, and that goes double for our titular furry former good boy who was just casually going about his day. For this video, I want to focus on the 1983 film because, unfortunately, I never had a chance to read the original novel spoiler-free, and as such, some of the desired effect didn't exactly rub off on me in the way that it should have. But having recently rewatched the film, it still has a filthy, evocative bite to it that I'm surprised not many people bring up when it comes to discussing grounded creature features, as it were. As we go along, if you have vivid memories of either the book or film, please make sure to let me know about them in the comments below, and if you enjoy the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and lastly, let me take a quick moment to thank this video sponsor, Raycon. When I am out walking my dog in undesirable weather or just still trying to wake up, I like to wear my Raycon everyday earbuds to help lift my mood and build some determined vibes. These light, cozy, slickly designed, and awesomely sounding earbuds are a must-have for every conceivable activity, whether you're simply relaxing in bed, traveling to work, or specifically on the more exhausting days. I like to plug them in to calm my nerves before and after dodgeball competitions, because wow, things can get emotional, and I just need to listen to a Brian Eno score to bring me back to reality. Not only do Raycons come in several different colors, but they stay protected in a stylish charging case that can provide up to 32 hours of battery life and 8 hours of playtime, which is perfect if you're in a rush and forget to charge them overnight. Raycons also come packed with different gel tips to ensure my earbuds are always the right fit for me. Like, I've been using these bad boys for a few years now, and you'd think with my characteristic clumsiness I would have lost them at some point, but they've yet to unexpectedly fall out, which is a miracle to me. Starting at just half the price of other premium audio brands, if you need a second opinion, Raycon has received over 48,000 5-star reviews and come with a 30-day happiness guarantee, so you can ensure they're perfectly right for you. Simply click the link in the description box below or go to buyraycon.com/Ryan to get 15% off your order. Bluntly speaking, Cujo taps into this underlying fear I house deep within my subconscious that, for all the positive joy and affection I share towards dogs, it only takes one bad experience to change that worldview. Look, I am no expert on dogs, so I don't know anything about their wild side. I have had nothing but great experiences with them. I'm not intimidated by a bark or a growl, and so naturally, I'm less likely to have my guard up around them. However, I am aware of people with the opposite perspective and have experienced vicious encounters, especially dogs trained to act upon their less affectionate side by horrible owners who weaponize and abuse their pets. Cujo plays off the notion that good can transform into evil, but rarely is it by choice, and given the dogs are unquestionably such a universal example of the domesticated, always loyal pet, Cujo feels appropriately universal on the matter of when things go wrong because of how strong our emotional bond with dogs typically is. By the end, Cujo is practically a zombie ingested with a remorseless rage that would make even the demigods from Ghostbusters cower in fear. And as a dog lover myself, that transition is inherently heartbreaking. In fact, I've heard the interpretation that Cujo is a metaphor for King's experiences with addiction, but it's something I never actually considered, and so I won't focus on that because it's not my idea, yet it does completely recontextualize the underlying point of the story if you wish to argue there is one. In my eyes, Cujo simply is what it is. It feels similar to how King later approached Dreamcatcher, where he just wanted to write something agonizingly truthful about how he felt at the time. And so Cujo to me feels like taking what you love or are so intimately familiar with and simply reframing it in a horrifying and sometimes taboo way. However, just before we get into the story, I want to talk a bit about the atmosphere because there's something naturally deceptive about the film's gradual transition to a horror movie. There's a warm and inviting tranquility to the setting that inspires hope and reinvigoration, which is a feeling I typically associate with the approaching spring and summer months. Like with a classic Spielberg flick, the world is sensitive, harmonious, and undisturbed in a way that helps accentuate the foreboding ugliness that slowly casts over the setting. More so, it extends into Cujo's transformation into a killing machine, where it feels like a poisonous, rotting cloak that's been wrapped around him. Or maybe I've just been playing way too much Elden Ring because fuck you, Scarlet Rot. But even when we do launch into a full-on doggy danger assault, the setting still maintains an untouched harmony to sustain believability and reinforce Cujo's reign of terror as a seemingly insignificant isolated incident that, like when I talked about Dead Man's Shoes, ultimately has no impact on the world around the characters. My point is, what makes simple stories like Cujo extra effective is much like the cultural backdrop of 70s and 80s slasher flicks, Cujo is built around meaningless random acts of violence, and even this weirdly subversive form of stranger danger where the horror comes from just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, especially settings that are seemingly harmonious. Anyway, moving on to Cujo's story, the setup sees our big, beautiful St. Bernard chase a rabbit into a hole, only to be bitten by a rabid bat that causes Cujo to grow increasingly feral, all while the majority focus is actually placed on the Trenton family and to a lesser extent the dog's owners, the Camber family. It's not necessarily unusual to say that Cujo is basically a B-plot that transitions into a main plot, as Cujo's growing rage is pretty much a lingering tension that goes largely unnoticed by the characters, too distracted by their own problems until it's too late. For example, the Camber son notices something is up with Cujo, but it's treated with irrelevancy to the conflict within the family, that being that he and his mother are going on a trip to essentially get away from their domineering father Joe, who serves as the local mechanic to the Trenton family. The Camber family drama is fairly restrained as far as domestic conflicts go, as it more so teeters on a boiling point where you're just waiting for Joe to lash out at his family, but thankfully they get away before Joe can act upon his shittiness. The Trenton family, on the other hand, is a very different and surprising beast of a human drama. It's established that the mother Donna is having an affair with her high school ex Steve, only for her husband Vic to find out just before he goes on a business trip. We do learn quickly, however, that Donna clearly shows remorse for her actions, as she seemingly felt tempted due to the strain and lack of freedom she currently shares with Vic, who himself wants to settle down further and have another child. Eventually, Donna and her son Tad take the family car to Joe's house for repairs, and that's when the big crescendo commences, where Donna and Tad take refuge in the broken down car as Cujo patiently waits outside. It's from here where the film shows its true ugliness, because it's not so much the dog that's the problem, it's the baking sun that slowly kills Donna and Tad due to dehydration and heat stroke. Going back to what I said about Cujo being wrapped in a poisonous cloak, he basically becomes this dog-like Grim Reaper of sorts, with no concern for its victory because it's pretty confident that its victory is inevitable. In short, death can wait for eternity, but life cannot. And so this is where we enter into spoiler territory. There is no other word to describe the climax than distressing. Watching Donna try to keep herself and her son alive is so painful and prolonged that I was desperately hoping help would arrive. What essentially happens is that Vic leaves his trip early to return home to rebuild his marriage, but ends up being delayed by a red herring in the form of Steve, who is suspected of having abducted his family, only to eventually realize that the car has gone for repairs. There's something kind of ironic about the circumstances ultimately being mundane as opposed to some big crazed ex-lover conspiracy that fits with the humble tone of the story. Soon after, Donna does manage to fight off Cujo with the skin of her teeth, but where the drastic difference between the film and book lie is in the outcome of Tad. In the book, it may come to your utter disbelief that Tad actually dies from heat stroke, while in the film we get the implication of a happy ending after Tad is thankfully revived and Vic reunites with his family. However, the thing is, what I really like about the climax is regardless of which ending you prefer, there's no tangible relief from the madness, no detox to breathe or reflect. It just sort of exhaustingly wears you down to the point I actually find it kinda depressing. Nothing is technically resolved, the characters just have to live with what they've experienced, and being that it's a horror that's so causeless and random, it really does present itself as something that could really happen to anyone. Cujo is fundamentally a domesticated example of the creature feature. It's a freak accident, an untamable natural horror that nobody suspects, one that simply infiltrates our stressful, complicated everyday lives, making our constant worries all the more unreasonable.